Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more Entitled People stories. In this video, a Karen ordered her police officer's son to arrest me. I refused because it was a totally unlawful order. Here is what happened. And the first one is a malicious compliance story. So early last year, I've started working for a small transport/warehouse company here in the UK. As I had changed professions, I had to be trained from the ground up, but the MD's son hit off from the moment we met at the interview and was determined to get me on the team. I was given an afternoon shift, which meant I got to learn the trade both the proper way from the day shift and the backdoor kind of way from the night shift. Now, it's important to point out that it is both our company policy and a contract with our clients that if we were to require any third-party trailers for loading outside hauling that is not part of the company, we had to contact them by email and await a reply. Night shift being night shift, you usually don't end up getting a reply until about 6 o'clock next morning when the day shift starts. This meant that if we wanted to load anything on third-party trailers, we had to find our own way. Now, my personal way of life was always to help everyone out, as when you need something from them, they usually are happy to provide. There was one third-party hauler which loaded with us quite often, and the night shift manager often used to ring us out to find out if we loaded anything they were to pick up in the morning. We will call them Fusion Transport. I ended up doing them quite a lot of favors over the months, whether it was loading stuff early or arranging for them to come at a specific time and get turned around within a few minutes. The only problem is that we have multiple clients in our warehouse, let's call them A and B. I've met and almost always helped Fusion in regards to our client B, but they often did work for our client A as well. The only problem was that the two clients have been contacting two different depots of Fusion Transport, and I was not allowed to leverage my contact there if I needed something for client A. This is where the fun starts. Just a few days before Christmas last year, on a Sunday, our client A has informed us that they had just agreed a load going to one of their biggest customers. The load was supposed to be delivered at 3 o'clock Monday morning, and we had been informed at 22 o'clock on a Sunday evening. Mind you, on Sunday afternoons all of the warehouse crew finishes at 18 o'clock and don't get back in until Monday at 6, so I was there alone, just manning the office. Conversation went something like this. Client A: "So we've just sent you an order info for an urgent load that's gotta be delivered in 5 hours time." Me: "Well, I'm alone here at the moment, but if you're desperate for it, I can go out and assemble and load the trailer myself. I just need you to send a driver down with a trailer so that I can load it." Client A: "Well, that's the problem. It's being taken by Fusion Transport and they only agree to it if they can arrive at your place and pick up the trailer, otherwise they won't make it in time for delivery." Me: "Well, fair enough, but first of all, we have none of their trailers here, and even if we did, I cannot move one onto a loading bay myself. Have you got one down at your place? One of your drivers could bring it so it's ready?" Client A: "Nope, we've got nothing." Yes, I know what you're gonna say. Our planning department is a load of bollocks. And me: "About right. Is this desperate then?" Client A: "If we don't deliver in time, there will be quite a large fine." Me: Right. Leave it with me." At this point I thought, F it, if they are that desperate for it, I'm gonna venture slightly outside the policy and request help from my fella down that Fusion. So I called him up and explained where I stand. He went silent for a few minutes and then told me, "Fusion Transport guy, you know what, pal, you've done me quite a few favors recently, so it's about time I paid back. I'm gonna send one of my drivers with a trailer you need and a couple of fellas to give you a hand doing so. How does that sound?" Me: "You're having a laugh, aren't you?" Fusion Transport guy: "No buddy, I would say that puts us about equal." And he did exactly as he promised, and about half an hour later I had a driver with a trailer and 3 other guys to help me load it. It was ready just in time for the other depot of Fusion Transport to collect it. I rang up out client A and told it the order had been loaded and was on its way to the customer. He praised me for working miracles and we left it on that. Next day afternoon, I come into work only to be greeted by the general manager and managing director himself, both asking me how the hell did I pull it off, as they had spoken with our client A and they knew that we had no trailers to load it on and they couldn't provide any either. I explained to them what happened and how I got it done. What kind of took me by surprise was that instead of at least a nod of approval, I'd been bollocked for breaching company policy. Unhappy, I returned to my duties, but I kept it in the back of my mind for a future reference. And boy, oh boy, did I have a grin on my face when in early January I received a nearly identical phone call on a late Sunday night, but this time I was gonna do it properly. I composed a quick email to confirm that we had received an order and that we urgently required a Fusion transport trailer to load it on. I ensured to copy in as many people in management as possible, including both the general manager and managing director. About an hour after I get a call from my general manager asking me how I am doing with this order, I calmly proceeded to explain to him that due to well-foreseen circumstances I was unable to load anything as I did not get a trailer for it. He was furious and he hung up on me. About 10 minutes later, he and the managing director both walk into the office and proceed to question me on why the hell I cannot get one thing done. Well, so I put on my special face reserved for moments like these and said, well, it was pointed out to me last time that I am to strictly follow company policy in situations like these. I've requested a trailer and I'm awaiting a response from client A. General manager, but you know they cannot provide you with one. Me, I'm well informed of this fact, sir. However, our policy states that we can only request trailers from them. Unless, of course. This is when I put my hands together and started rotating my thumbs around each other like a hunter waiting on his trap to trigger. General manager was fuming at this point. Managing director just looked at him and then at me and went, Managing director, can you get a trailer sorted through one of your contacts? Me, possibly, but general manager won't be happy about me preaching the policy again. Managing director, screw him, you've got my permission. If he has anything against it, I'll take it on personally. So I proceeded and rang my contact. He was happy to provide me with a trailer as he had a driver in my area who had just finished a job. I turned around and told them that we'll have the trailer on the site shortly, but that due to the time wasted, I would not have time to load in time for collection. General manager just looked at me confused, but the managing director started to understand what I was hinting at. I wanted them to load the trailer with me. The best thing was that we use electric pallet riders, which you need to be qualified to ride, even though they are a piece of cake to use. This meant that my so-called helpers had to use the old-fashioned pump trucks to move the pallets around, which is not fun when the pallets weigh just under a ton. I will never forget the struggle faces they pulled as they were pushing the pump truck around the warehouse, and I was just zipping around them on my electric pallet rider. To this day, I was never questioned in how I do my work and what backdoors I use to get it done efficiently. And yeah, Ripestars, honestly, I would never complain about an employee that got things done efficiently, and I guess legally, much better than others, even if it might potentially breach company policy. But then again, I guess there are layers to all of this. If there's an employee that gets everything done super quickly, but I don't know, does something illegal, that of course pushes it too far. Anyway, the next one is the title story and it's titled, Karen orders her son to arrest me. So recently, a new neighbor moved in next door and she's the most insufferable Karen I've ever come across in real life or online. Karen seems to always find something to complain about, but what's new about that, right? Anyway, there is something new and that's the power of authority. What makes this particular Karen even more difficult to deal with is her constant boasting about her son, who happens to be a local police officer. She loves to flaunt his authority, using it as a shield whenever someone tries to confront her about her behavior. For example, when the neighborhood association asked her to trim her overgrown hedges, she refused, citing her son's position and hinting that any complaints would be dealt with by him. Now, I don't particularly love the kids in my area, but about a month back, a group of them accidentally kicked a ball into Karen's yard, and when they went to retrieve it, she came storming out, yelling at them to stay off her property. When one of the parents tried to reason with her, she threatened to call her son and have him arrest them for trespassing. Again, it's like she enjoys using her son's authority to bully others and get her way. Again, what's new? A week after that incident that had many parents avoiding her like the plague, Karen was seen being extremely rude to some elderly neighbors who were having a friendly gathering in the park. Now, I understand that sometimes these people can get a bit too loud, but unless you have decided to work in the park, the noise does not really bother us. Well, us as in normal people. Our dear Karen, though, is very much bothered by it. She stormed over and demanded that they keep the noise down, even though they were just playing bingo. When one of the elders asked her to mind her own business, Karen started shouting at them and threatened to have her son arrest them for harassing her. I kind of pitied them because, yeah, they can be a little bit rude, but accusing these old people of something so disgusting when they were simply trying to enjoy their lives after their children left to work outside, it's very low and very cheap behavior. In a different incident that was as ironic as it can get, Karen was caught on camera parking her car in a clearly marked no parking zone outside the local grocery store. When approached by a store employee who asked her to move her car, Karen became defensive and refused to comply. Then she went on to say that because her son is a police officer and keeps the residents safe, she has the right to park wherever she wants. Are we even surprised that someone who uses her son's position to punish others for breaking non-existent laws will also use it to defend herself when she breaks the law herself? Nope, not at all. Anyway, despite the employee's attempts to reason with her, Karen remained defiant, continuously saying how she deserved to be treated better because her son took risks to protect this society. And by the way, quick note here, it seems like the son should have taken steps to protect society from his Karen mom. Clearly, he failed at that. Anyway, eventually she left her car parked illegally and just walked away, leaving others to deal with the mess she created. Last week was a special evening for me as I hosted a small gathering with my friends in my backyard. This was the first party I had thrown since Karen moved in next door, and it was to celebrate my recent promotion at work. I made sure that we were not breaking any noise ordinances or rules, keeping the volume at a reasonable level for a backyard get-together. However, Karen being Karen became irritated by the noise and decided to confront me about it. She claimed that she likes to walk in the evening and found our party too noisy for her liking. Despite the considerable distance between our houses, Karen seemed determined to spoil our celebration. She demanded that I shut down the party immediately, as if her evening walks were more important than our right to enjoy our property. I politely declined her request, explaining that we were not violating any rules and were well within our rights to have a gathering in our own backyard. Despite my attempts to reason with her, she remained adamant, showing no empathy or understanding for our special occasion. Again, what's new? Honestly, if at this point Karen kept to her business and didn't bother others, that would be out of character for her. So I stood my ground against Karen's unreasonable and childish demands. She grew increasingly agitated and threatened to call the police. Since I was already expecting it, I remained calm, knowing that we were not violating any laws, and welcomed her to do so if she felt it necessary. True to her word, Karen dialed the police number, specifically requesting her son, who was on duty, to respond to the scene. When Karen's son arrived, he immediately displayed a bias towards his mother, taking her side without even investigating the situation. Which, again, I was already expecting, but still gave him the benefit of the doubt. Despite my attempts to explain the situation and show that we were not disturbing the peace, he sided with Karen and insisted that we shut down the party. As the situation escalated, the officer became increasingly dismissive and demanded that I end the gathering, threatening arrest for disturbing the peace. When I pointed that he didn't actually have any evidence of any wrongdoing, he started being aggressive and saying how he did not need any evidence and to put me in my damn place. I stood my ground and politely, and kind of in a bored manner, refused to shut down my party. While this particular Karen might be new for me, this was not the first time I had dealt with a situation like this involving a power-drunk cop trying to get off on arresting innocent people just because he can. The officer's voice became louder, and he even threatened to arrest me for disobeying a lawful order. People living close by came out of their houses to see what was happening, and I could see Karen smiling smugly. However, I knew that I was within my rights to refuse an unjust order. I calmly informed the officer that I would happily comply with a lawful order, but that his current demand was baseless and unjust. I then requested the presence of a supervising officer to assess the situation and ensure that proper protocol was followed. When Karen's annoying son tried to deny my request, I informed him that I was recording the interaction as evidence of his misconduct. This seemed to both catch him and Karen off guard. He tried to stutter and say that what I was doing was illegal, but he could not physically harm me when so many witnesses were present around. So eventually he had to comply and ask for a supervising officer. Honestly, Karen's son was only bark and no bite, and he folded so quickly when I told him I was recording too. Soon the supervising officer arrived and quickly assessed the situation. He found no evidence of wrongdoing on my part and recognized the bias and misconduct displayed by Karen's son. The supervising officer reprimanded him for his unprofessional behavior and apologized to me for the inconvenience caused. As the supervising officer scolded Karen's son quite harshly, the neighbors who had gathered to witness the scene began to chuckle and laugh, some even recording the whole thing. They were used to Karen's attempt to assert authority and manipulate situations to her advantage, but seeing her son, who she often boasted about, being called out for his behavior was absolutely ironic and hilarious. Karen, on the other hand, appeared visibly humiliated by the turn of events. Her plan to use her son's position to intimidate me had backfired spectacularly, and now she was nothing more than a laughingstock. Leaving her son to be scolded, Karen quickly retreated back into the house. The supervising officer bid us a good evening and went away with Karen's son, and we had a good laugh about his red face as we parted. Or partied, I guess. And yeah, Ripestars, I gotta say, I really hope that Karen's son got even more consequences out of this other than a quick scolding, because police officers like this should not conduct themselves in such a way. Also, he's probably one of those guys that likes to turn off their body cam when they do stuff like this. This one is titled Big Troubles in the HOA. My wife Sarah and I were thrilled when we found out she was pregnant with our first child. We had just moved into our new home in a quaint little neighborhood, excited to start this next chapter of our lives. The day we brought our precious baby boy Logan home was one of the happiest of my life. That joy, however, was short-lived. It began with a knock at our door just 2 days after we were settled in at home with the baby. I opened it to find Janice, the HOA president, standing on our porch with a stern look on her face. "We have received a noise complaint about your residence," she stated. "Newborns are permitted in this community, but we must insist you keep the disruptions to a minimum." I was stunned. Our son was barely a week old and still waking every couple of hours crying. Of course he was gonna make some noise. He was a baby, for heaven's sake. "I'm sorry, but you cannot expect a newborn to be completely silent," I replied politely. "We are doing our best, but he needs tending to during the night." "Rules are rules," Janice said. "Control the noise or face a fine." And with that she turned and marched off. I closed the door, shaking my head in disbelief. A noise complaint already? Who could possibly be disturbed by the occasional cries of our tiny infant? Over the next few weeks the complaints persisted. Janice knocked on our door or left threatening notices about the incessant shrieking of our newborn. We explained that we were exhausted new parents doing our best, but Janice would not hear it. She seemed obsessed with enforcing total silence from our house day and night. By the time Logan was 2 months old, we had received over a dozen noise complaints directly from Janice. Never once did an actual neighbor come forward, it was always her. We pleaded with her to have some compassion. Logan was teething and colicky now, his outbursts could not be controlled. But Janice did not care, she wanted him silenced or else. The final straw came on a Saturday morning when I was home alone with the baby. Sarah had gone to her yoga class for a brief respite while I looked after Logan. He had been crying on and off while I tried every trick to soothe his teething pain. No luck, but suddenly a fist pounded violently on the front door. I scooped up Logan and opened it to find a completely unhinged Janice. "That's it, I've had it with all the racket from your household," she yelled. "It stops now or you're out of this neighborhood, you hear?" Little Logan burst into frightened sobs. I clutched him tightly, shielding him from this mad woman. Anger coursed through me. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said. "You're threatening a family with a newborn. He's crying because he's a baby. We cannot control it." "Rules are rules," she spat back. "Get that brat under control." That was the final straw. I had it with her crazy tyranny over something so normal as a baby cries. After I managed to calm poor Logan down again, I called Sarah and told her what happened. She was outraged. "That's insane," she said. "We cannot let her bully new parents like this." "What if Logan starts waking up every hour again? Is she going to try and foreclose on our house when he cries?" I agreed. We needed to stand up to Janice once and for all. An idea struck me. I still had all the threatening notices she had left, complete with dates and times. I could use those timestamps to cross-reference our security camera footage. If I proved that Janice exaggerated or lied about the noise levels, we had a case against her. So I got to work gathering evidence. And sure enough, the footage exposed her lies. Video clips of her pounding furiously on our door while Logan cooed quietly or slept proved that her so-called noise violations were all a fabrication. Armed with this proof, I called a lawyer and outlined the harassment we had faced. To my relief, he agreed to help us fight back. He drafted a stern warning letter to Janice and the HOA board, calling for her immediate removal as a president given her unhinged targeting of an innocent newborn. Janice, of course, did not go quietly. She responded with her own threatening letter insisting the HOA would countersue us for violating noise policies if we kept accusing her. She had clearly grown drunk with power as president, but I wasn't about to cave to her intimidation, not with my son's well-being on the line. We had laws on our side plus time-stamped video proof. So we sued Janice for harassment and slander. When we had our day in court, Janice marched in full of bluster, assuming she could just bully us into backing down. But the look on her face changed to one of disbelief as we presented video evidence of her deceit. The judge himself could hardly believe a supposed community leader would concoct such malicious lies about an innocent baby. In the end, justice was served. Janice was not only removed as HOA president, but forbidden from running again. The judge also granted us a restraining order given her unhinged obsession with our newborn. Meanwhile, we won a sizable settlement from the HOA given the harassment we endured at Janice's hands. Relief washed over Sarah and I driving home that day, knowing that Logan was finally safe, both from Janice's crazy noise complaints and her threats to have us expelled from the neighborhood. Maybe now we could focus on the joys of parenting without living in fear of our unhinged HOA president. In the weeks that followed, we received a steady stream of apologies from board members, neighbors, even folks we barely knew. It turns out Janice had been a petty tyrant abusing her power as a president through intimidation and deceit for a long time. Everyone was mortified at how she treated new parents and a baby. Finally free of her presence, our neighborhood began to transform into the friendly, peaceful community we always hoped for. These days, when Logan cries his head off from teething pain, our neighbors respond with cookies and compassion, not complaints and harassment. And that surely is the sound of justice to my ears. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.